Hello, everyone. We are in a webinar, sadly, which means I can't see any of your faces. And that also limits our ability to communicate. For some reason, webinars lock that down as opposed to a meeting, and it just looks like we've got the wrong forms. So you guys will kind of unfortunately be quiet. You are able to raise your hands, it's my understanding, and I can also unmute you. So when we reach the point of asking questions or things like that, you can raise your hand so that I know that you've got a question. Also, the Q&A is available. You should find that on your toolbar strip in the somewhere on your Zoom window. It will allow you to ask me a question. Everybody can't see the question unless I type an answer back. So if I see a question pop up in there, I will just repeat what the question was and then I'll answer it. That way you guys can all have that same information. But we are here tonight talking about operations basics, which actually happens to be one of my favorite topics to talk about. I have spent a lot of years in operations outside of financial sectors that I've been in as far as businesses. And I think operations is fun. It can be probably one of the most difficult parts of a business when you really start to dive into it from the systems and processes that you could build, as well as the time that you could consume if you're have ever been in an operations type role or an operations management type role. And so obviously the better systems that you have and the better processes, the less time consuming or the less difficult that things tend to be. So we are going to go through a bunch of slides, right? As you guys could expect, especially when listening to me. And we will just go ahead and dive right in. So we'll take probably close to the whole hour. If I finish early, great, I'll give you the time back. If you guys don't know who I am, I think most of you probably do. I'm Christy Dudgeon. I'm the president of SBC Bookkeeping and Consulting. Actually, this says we're a technical assistance provider for the Wisconsin SSBCI. You guys don't care about that. You are here with Bridgeway. We are a technical assistance provider for Bridgeway, as well as we provide bookkeeping outside of the work that we do with Bridgeway for businesses just like you. So we assist entrepreneurs, small business consultants. We're assisting small businesses every day with what we do. Feel free to link with me on LinkedIn or link with SBC Consulting or our Facebook group. We do post a lot of our events that we have outside of the Bridgeway workshops, right? So we do workshops across the country with a lot of different partners, Wisconsin being one of them. They had a very similar workshop to this. And we do share those events. So if you have an interest in learning more outside of what Bridgeway is offering you, obviously you can join in the majority of those events that we do post because the partners are really there to hosting these workshops and an interest to help small businesses no matter where you may be. So what is creating the most stress in your business right now? You guys can drop that answer actually in the question and answer. This is also a test to see if you can find the Q&A. And just let me know what your biggest stress in your business is right now, right? It could be anything. Maybe your financials are not where they need to be. Maybe you're here because of operations, right? You're stressed out about that. You have marketing issues. You're not really sure if your marketing plan is working or how to generate sales or whatever that may be. So just go ahead and drop it in there. That way I just have an idea of kind of where you guys all are at the beginning of this as stresses. Just so you are aware, this is going to be interactive. There are a lot of questions that I'm going to be asking as we go along. And then remember, nobody can see your answers except for me. So don't be afraid to be honest or tell me about your business and kind of where it stands. So from a stress standpoint, we've already got personnel issues, financing issues, launching a website, finding the time, getting the team up to speed, and being able to step away from work, right? Things not being done correctly. Nobody seems to operate the way we would operate. Increasing in postage issues, logistics, right? Costs and shipping are definitely going up. So Definitely a wide range of, what's our biggest issues right now. So often to the person that answered how getting things done and being able to step away from the business, the real problem obviously isn't a workload issue. It's how the work gets done and it's how we structure it. Certainly there's a trust issue there, right? If we don't have employees that are necessarily trained or they wouldn't necessarily do the work the way that we would. However, I had a business coach many, many years ago that actually worked with a company that I was in. And he always used the phrase, be hard on the process and soft on the person. And basically, what that means is if something is going wrong in your business, somebody's not doing something the way that you would do it or you would want them to do it, right? You're going to look at the process and see how that's laid out. And you're going to be hard on that process, right? Where is that process breaking down? Where's the problems? Why is it not being completed that way? Because if the process is bad, right, then no matter who the person is that's following in that process is not going to be able to complete it to your satisfaction. There are people that will, not follow a process. So I am sympathetic to that as well. But so what owners often think we need is that we need more staff, we need more hours, we need better employees, we need less business. Actually heard a business. I talked to them not that long ago that they said, "Oh, we grew, but it was just more work for me," i.e., the owner, more work for the owner. So we reduced sales the following year and actually decreased by $1 million or $2 million, which is typically not our game plan, right? And really what it was after speaking to the owner is they just had not passed off some of the responsibilities that they were handling themselves to any of their other employees, or they didn't make a key hiring decision, right? So maybe they didn't have an employee within the company that was able to handle some of those responsibilities. So they really had to look hard at their processes, right, and their systems in place, and then get the right people in the right seats to do the work and then regrow the business. Owner's always solving the problem. Owner becomes the bottleneck. This is very, very common. We as owners, we hold tight to a lot of things, right? This is our baby. This is our business. And as we try to scale and grow, one of the main bottlenecks or main problems is actually the owner won't get out of their own way. Not always the case, but it is one of those hard truths that we sometimes have to face. Team is asking more and more questions. I actually worked in a business one time. I was a key hire in order to help them do a complete restructure of their business. It was one of those the owner wouldn't be able to get out of his own way. He finally recognized he was the problem that was holding the business back. So we went through an entire restructuring of who are the people that need to be those right people in those right seats. However, we laughed because once I sat in the seat that I was in during this restructuring, there was a path basically worn in the carpet of all the employees coming to my desk to ask questions. So we had a lot of things to work through with that company, but sometimes change is difficult, right? And you having someone there that can help you manage through that is super helpful. More mistakes are probably going to happen, and then the owner then has to jump in and solve those problems, right? So owner dependency is just an ongoing cycle that never seems to end, right? And some of you are probably feeling that right now. What's often actually happening is the work just isn't organized. Expectations aren't documented. So that's kind of that process that I'm talking about. Not kind of, it is the process that I'm talking about. Who does what, when things get delivered, when do you do a certain thing? Information is trapped in people's heads. I like to use the example of a business that I actually went into. It was one of my first consulting clients that I ever had. And I was there purely because everything was stuck in the owner's head. He had owned the business for 20 years, down to the vendors that they utilized, as well as the customers that they worked with. Trying to route a service-based company off of the fact that you have no addresses for your customers makes it impossible. And really, I was there because he was, getting older, wanted to start working his way out of the business, had tried to hire a couple of operations managers. They had failed. That pretty much were set up for failure, right? You got to have the information. If you need to buy something, you need to know who your key vendors are that you're probably going to purchase from. So unfortunately, those didn't work out. We set systems in place. We got different processes in place. We documented all of the vendors, the customers that business transformed. And by transformed, I mean they were a $1.4 million business when I joined them, and they sold the business for $55 million. So a lot happened in the time I was there and then after. But that's just a perfect example of where the owner can sometimes be the reason that the business can't get past a certain point. Processes vary every time. So the people do it one way this time, you do it this way the next time, and maybe this way, right? And so they get very inconsistent results. The team can be frustrated by that, and then that definitely stresses you out at the owner. So you have to break that cycle, right? And build a business that works without you. That's the whole goal. Maybe we wanted to work in our business for a period of time as the owner, but ultimately our goal is someday we do want to be able to step out of it, either to pass it on to family, to sell it, whatever it may be. So we can simplify what can be made easier. So we've got to really step back from the business. I'm sure you guys have heard the phrase of working on the business instead of in the business, right? And it's sometimes difficult to do this process that we're going to talk about tonight when we are so ingrained in the business and trying to build it and grow it and do all the things that we just don't have time to really be able to see what's happening and to start to put these in place. So that's why you sometimes work with a consultant or someone like that who is detached from the business, right? And who is able to observe and then advise and be able to see those things. But you want to make it clear and easy to follow. Systemizing. This is the best thing that you can do, especially from an operations standpoint. But systems exist in sales processes, they exist in finance as well. So, what should become a documented process? That's another question. You can't document everything. You probably shouldn't document everything. That becomes over documenting, right? But we want to document, create consistency, and then we want to train. And it often requires retraining, and processes also require continual refining because employees will find where they break or they aren't as clear, right? And so we've got to continue doing that. So more clarity is less chaos, better results, more freedom. That's what you guys want as a business owner someday. So if you could solve one operational frustration today, which would have the biggest impact, what would it be? I didn't finish my question there, but that is my question. So just looking at it operationally, if you could solve one frustration, what would it be? Go ahead and drop that in the Q&A. Have I lost you guys? Oh, there we go. There was just a delay. I'll give you guys a second to think about that. Okay, so it looks like we've got some personnel issues, processes maybe that are documented, but they're not being followed, streamlining. So maybe we've got some extra complicated things that are happening, consistency and work schedules. So we've got some headaches that are following kind of the same themes, but a little bit different. Inventory management, that one could definitely be an operational headache, right? Needing to have what you need to have when you need to have it, right? And when you don't have it, that's a big problem. So let's talk about reactive versus operationally healthy and kind of what this difference looks like. These are two different businesses. Definitely that one business that I was describing at 1.4 million versus when they finally sold the company. It started out very much the one on the left. All of the employees were like this, as well as the business owner. Every morning they would come in, they would sit down, the owner would sit there at his desk, he would write out what they were all going to do that day, and then he would go talk to them, and then they would go outside and they would get the supplies that they needed. And so it was taking hours, it seemed like, just to get people out the door, right? And to start serving clients. And then fires were created, right? And they were very good at fighting fires. So the phone call would come in, okay, we got to go there. And then they would pull someone off a job site and they would go over and they would fix that mistake. And then they would go over here and they would fix that mistake. And so that's extremely inefficient, right? And when you're in a vehicle, especially now with fuel prices way more than they were back then, That's a lot of windshield time. We call that in service-based businesses. So that's the time someone's sitting in a vehicle driving from place to place, as well as um, the inefficiency of, having to drive from here to there instead of, having a consistent route that someone's following. And it's just because, that I'm sitting down that morning trying to decide what everybody's going to do, as opposed to having a great schedule and having things routed and having things planned as far as what a contract might say. And there was constant interruptions, which is just drives everyone crazy, right? So the phone is always ringing, people were always mad, you're making last minute decisions that are never good, and it's just a perpetual cycle. It just never stops once it starts. So on the other side, though, operationally healthy means we've planned, we've executed, we're reviewing, we're constantly improving, we've got a workflow, right? People know what they're responsible for, they know what those priorities are planned. It's very clear there's a lot fewer surprises. So there was some definite systems that we had to put in place with this business, as far as first looking at who our contracts were, right? Who we were working with, how many times we were actually supposed to be visiting them. There's a lot of conversations with clients. Maybe they had expectations up here, but they had a contract down here. And of course, they were the first ones that were calling and complaining. So there was a lot to work through there. Also, the way that the planning was done, so that when people came into work, they already knew exactly what they were going to be doing for the day. They already knew exactly what materials, supplies they needed. They knew what vehicle they were going to be in, right? There's a lot of information that can flow through there. And it is time consuming, right? It does require often someone who might be in that spot that's responsible for that. So strong operations, though, is less chaos and more freedom. So this is your clarity before growth. So signs that your operation needs attention. Things are regularly falling through the cracks, right? People call and complain, said, I asked for this, it didn't happen, right? Maybe from the inventory management standpoint, you ordered something, however, you didn't have a process there as far as following that through. You didn't know that the order didn't get shipped, or maybe there was an email back where there was a problem with the order, these kinds of things, right? And so when you needed it, it wasn't there. Like, those things happen. Streamlining financials, this is another thing where those processes are, things fall through the cracks. You're expecting things, especially from an AR standpoint or accounts receivable, right? You didn't receive that. You don't have a process for following up for that. Cash flow starts to become big problems. So you can kind of see, just in what I'm saying, lots of processes. Work gets done differently each time. This is a very frustrating one. And to the person that answered, they don't pay attention to the processes I put in place. Obviously, this is a training thing, and this can be frustrating. The process is here. We need to follow it. There is a reason, right? And then we could talk personnel all day long for people who refuse to follow a process, right? But that might not be the right employee for you. Team members wait for direction. So then, if the process doesn't allow for enough decision making within it, right? So we can try to make everybody robots from a process and make them follow the exact same process step by step, or they have the ability to make decisions along the way. But if they don't, then they're always going to be waiting on you for direction or for that decision, right? And they're not going to know what to do next. And that all depends on your type of business as well. You may be in a business where there is that step-by-step confirmed process. This happens before this happens, before this happens. Is this yes? Is this no? Right? You've seen the workflows, the decision trees that could even be there. Important information lives in people's heads. Anytime it's in somebody's head and it's not documented, then nobody's going to know how to do it. And then taking time off obviously feels impossible, right? Because nothing's getting done right. Indicators to watch for: employees are always coming to you for answers. That's a key thing. If they're always coming to you for the same answer, you need to document the process. You have to approve every decision. Again, you have to document the process. There are some approvals that require you every single time, right? It's usually financial ones. Progress slows when you're unavailable. So you took a day off, the company stopped, things didn't get done, the phone didn't get answered, whatever that may be. And you are the backup plan for everything. So systems really do create freedom, and freedom then drives that growth. So things falling through the cracks, examples: missed deadlines, forgotten follow-ups, unfinished projects, customer requests slipping through the cracks. I always talk about this with snow removal. So I was in a company, we did snow removal on a very large scale. In fact, I was in a company where we did it on a national scale at one point. So there are a lot of requests that come in a very short period of time, right? Because the nature of snow, the snow falls, everybody freaks out, makes their request, and then people are rolling, right? Well-planned snow removal already has them on a route, right? It's already part of it. And they're just calling and you're confirming, yes, that this is when the expectation of when you would be there, or whatever that may be. And so having a system of task management, so every business would have a system of task management one way or another, right? Snow removal just happens to be all the tasks at once are loaded there. And having visibility to what those are and who has the ability to add to it, who are things assigned to, right? How do you know if something was completed? So a lot of this lives in somebody's head or somebody's email. That's not usually the best place for it, right? Google Doc is one of the simplest places to put a task list like this to ensure that things don't get missed, because it's just a list, right? You create well, not a Google Doc, either a Google Doc or a Google Sheet, or Microsoft, depending on what your company has availability to, right? But if you guys have Gmail, everybody's got the Google spreadsheet, right? People can put things on there. You can assign who's responsible. You can put a deadline on there. People can add notes, right? So that they know where things are. And then there's greater visibility to what those are. And then if there is a call or a complaint or something like that, someone can just look at that list and know exactly what's going on. So task tracking is a very big thing, and it needs to be live. Sticky notes is another one, or stuck in people's head. Unclear ownership, and I don't mean this from a owner level. It means that nobody in the organization has responsibility for something. And this is really key as your business starts to grow and you have employees. So probably when you're starting out or you're small, the only person in your business that owns what's happening is the owner. Then when you have someone who's maybe overseeing your financials, or you have tasked them with the financials, you are then giving them ownership to certain tasks that are within that, right? And so that becomes not only their job responsibility, but they also own the results to it. And owning the results is a big deal. It is what empowers someone to be able to make those decisions and to also improve processes and things of that nature. So think about that when you make key hires. That person has to own the results to someone. And really, an org structure often looks like finance, maybe HR's with that, operations, and sales. And it's very rare that people cross over and own, someone at some phase of your business when it's early on, you might own all that, right? And then you slowly peel it off and maybe they own something else. But defining what they really do own and what their responsibilities are from that deliverable standpoint and what those results are is really important. So that unclear ownership is like, oh, it's everybody's job, but it's nobody's job, right? Nobody's going to end up doing it. And then that lack of follow-up process. So the cost of owner dependency, asking the same questions all the time, customers receiving inconsistent experiences, that's very frustrating. Mistakes are happening repeatedly, training is taking longer than it should, and growth is limited by your time and availability as the owner. So the more it depends on you, the more the growth is going to be limited. So how many of these warning signs exist in your business today that we just went over? Right. Yep. So lots of people asking questions. Nobody's owning anything. I'll go back to what they were. Customers receiving inconsistent experiences, mistakes happening repeatedly, training is taking longer, and maybe the company's not growing the way that it should. So, or you could answer these top left ones, things falling through the cracks. You answer the same questions over and over. Work gets done differently every time. Team members are waiting for direction. Important information lives in people's heads. Even if it's not your head, it's living in somebody else's head. And taking time off feels impossible to you. I'll give you a minute. We had an answer about custom work, so consistency would be extremely difficult with custom work. Yeah. It's hard to create a world of robots, definitely, when you're customizing everything that you do. All right. Solopreneur, yeah, solopreneur. It is all just you at this moment, right? And maybe your business model is set up so that's what you're going to be. So what happens when these issues then go unaddressed? Operational challenges don't just create stress, they cost time, money, and opportunities for growth. So if things are unaddressed, then you know, maybe you can't see or recognize what that cost of time or money. It's costing you time, right? It You may not have visibility to how much money it's costing you yet because you haven't really dove into it. But just mentioning the situation where it was the service-based company, right? And the owner was sitting there in the morning writing out the schedule. You know, there's 20 people standing there waiting on him. So, of course, me from an operations as well as finance, I'm going every single minute. What is that costing the company for anyone to be standing there waiting for direction? And so the response of waiting for direction is probably costing you money, right? There, you could probably almost put a value on that as well. So operational chaos really does cost more than you think. Lost time, lost revenue, frustrated customers, employee frustration, owner burnout, limited capacity. Falling through the cracks, we already talked about that. The solution for strong operations, though, let's start with clarity. Everyone knows what to do, how, and why. You have to be able to answer those three questions. Consistency, the work is getting done the same way every time. Even with the custom work, there are processes that you can put in place to ensure that the level of detail that's needed for the custom work is on the front end, and any follow-up process, right, that might exist there. Empowering the team. I mentioned this before, those clear roles of accountability and trust, which I know can be difficult, and then sustainable growth. So more time, better decisions, stronger results. And that's what you really want, right? You want less stress and more time. So what cost has the biggest impact on your business today overall? You guys can answer that in the chat. Yes, employees having to rework, right? Rework is extremely costly to a business, even if it's not a customized type project that you're working on. So, a lot of customer complaints are what I would call rework, right? And hopefully you've got the process in place, right? You're catching it before you have that complaint from the customer so that your quality control. Lost opportunity by not being able to scale as I want. So absolutely, you're having to turn down sales when there's opportunity because you can't scale the way that you want, right? These are big costs potentially to a business. So let's talk about systems then. 4 systems that every business needs. Now, obviously, today we're talking about operations systems, but I do want to touch on the other systems here. And I talked about when we were creating roles and who's responsible for those results. You'll notice this is very similar to those roles that I was talking about. So, operations systems, what is it? What are we talking about today? This is how the work gets done in your business. It's a documented process and workflows. It's clear roles and responsibilities. It's consistent execution and follow through. So that creates that consistency and it reduces the chaos. Then we've also got a people system. And these work together, right? All of these ultimately work together, but the ownership of those results looks a little bit different and the processes within them will look different. But people system is how things are communicated and the expectations, the accountability and the ownership part. and then that training and development that can result from that. So a lot of times this looks like HR, right, or something similar, but that obviously is very, very closely intertwined to operations, and they often are the same venture or the same group there in the beginning of business. Sales systems, this is how customers are acquired. So how are we doing lead generation? What's our sales process and follow-up look like? And what's the customer journey and conversation? And then we've got financial systems. So financial reporting and KPIs, what are our business goals, cash flow and management, and then our forecast and planning. So these provide clarity and decision making. I cannot stress the importance between how things are passed between one of these boxes. The biggest one being sales to operations. If your business is new and just starting, you probably are the sales leader as well as the operations leader. And so at this point, it's probably pretty clear you sold it, you know what's happening. Operations, you can tell everybody how to perform it, right? Or how the work is getting done, or how things get created at that point, orders get filled, depending on your type of business. But as you can start to grow, sales and operations are the two uh, divisions of a company, right? Or parts of a company that often have the most friction, right? So salespeople are driven to sell, operations people are driven to operate, and they often don't see eye to eye, right? The salesperson didn't sell it right, the operations person didn't produce it right, and there's a lot of back and forth. So not only do you need to make sure that you have the processes within sales that are defined here, as well as operations, but how does the information flow between the two? And that's kind of where that people system comes into place, right? How are things communicated? What are those expectations? And you might have finance step in between those two as well, because if you're selling something, there's a value involved, right? So finance is going to say, this is the information that has to be part of the sales process as well. This is then what gets handed over to operations so that they can understand what their gross margins are, or what they've got to work with, and then figure out how to be efficient, right, and make the business extremely profitable. So operating system, this is how the work gets done. As I mentioned, examples of this, client onboarding. So client onboarding would be kind of that I passed it off from sales into operations. Order fulfillment, service delivery, project management, daily workflows. This is the heart of a well-run business. Sales gets all the glory, right? Operations makes it happen. Creates consistency so everyone's following the same proven process. It reduces those mistakes so you have clear steps and standardized, minimizing those errors. Makes work repeatable so systems allow you to deliver quality every single time. And it also helps people know what happens next. So strong operation systems create that clarity and free up time every time. A task management system, I briefly talked about this. Ensures that important work doesn't depend on memory. This is one of the first steps. Get it out of memory, get it out of, if you're using QuickBooks and creating estimates, get it out of there, right? That's not just a financial thing. That's something that operations needs, right? It becomes part of that process, that handoff between sales and operations. How do those conversations happen? Don't forget sticky notes, bad. Text messages, also bad. How many of you read a text message and then forgot you read it and then never go back and respond to it? I'll remember later. I don't know about you, but the older that I get, the less I remember later. So using some kind of confirmable, verifiable task list is the best thing. Have a system for it. It can be as simple as the Google list that I was talking about, or a Google Doc or something like that everyone has access to. You can actually even use a Google Doc, create a checkbox to it, and assign it to someone. I actually started doing that myself to our marketing team, so that they could, that I would know when they followed up on some of the tasks that I was asking. Shared project boards. If you have any kind of project management software, or want to dabble in project management software, right? There's things like Trello or Asana, if you've heard of those, which create these visible cards, and then you actually have a list in which you move them through so that you can see where something is in the process. So, and this can be something that you can even use a whiteboard for. In the world where I've been before, we had an entire room of whiteboards. And that was because it was crews, it was trucks, it was contracts, it was pieces of equipment, it was all these crazy things that we were putting together. And when you are working with a team of with people trying to see it all at once. Actually, electronic is a little more difficult from a planning standpoint. So you could have all these whiteboards, right? And that could provide the direction. Now, you have to be location specific in order to do that. Electronic is a little bit nicer, right? You can sometimes work from other places to create those, but really giving that visibility to what's going on so that people can see it. And also those assigned responsibilities. That's a big one. Who's responsible for whatever's on there? And then due dates. How do they know when something is going to be due? And how do they communicate when something can't be done by that due date, right? Or where things are in progress. So a lot of project management things you'll see it'll say if it's started, it will say if it's in progress, it'll say if it's completed. I've even seen companies use a very, very simple spreadsheet that has what's called a red, yellow, green. It's red if it's not started, it's yellow if it's started, and it's green if it's done. That way anybody that's looking at it can say, okay, these are what's in progress, these are what's not started, and these are what's done. So capture it, assign it, track it, get it done. Every task, what every task needs, who owns it, when is it due, and what does done look like? So this is another thing that you need to be able to answer. It's not just go do this, right? Or you need to go do this. This is exactly what the problem is, and this is exactly what needs done. So if you have that clear definition of done, then it really leaves the ambiguity out of it, and someone can be successful with completing it. So the best tools are the ones you actually use. This is the important part, right? Simple is a written checklist. Of course, it's stuck in one spot. A shared spreadsheet, as I mentioned, phone notes. So a lot of people will have them in phone notes. Google Tasks is another one. A moderate level one is Microsoft Planner or Trello, as I mentioned. More advanced is Asana, ClickUp, Monday.com. These are available kind of project management tools. The goal is visibility, right? And also ease of use, not just visibility, but also ease of use. You want people to not only add tasks to it when they're needed to, but also to successfully say when they're done or add those notes and whatever that may be. So what are most of your tasks in your business currently being tracked on? How are you guys keeping track of that? You can answer that in the Q&A. Or are you tracking them? Yep, all in my head. If you are a business of one, of course they're all in your head, right? We've got Google Calendar, we've got paper calendar. So yeah, Monday.com for details and projects happening. Yeah, so there are a ton of things out there. Obviously, I'm not advocating for one or the other, but know that as your business scales, so when you start to really look down, what will happen when you talk about processes, right? So I have my current task management. If I have another employee or 5 employees or whatever that, when will I outgrow this task management, right? And if it's in our head, we have one more employee, we outgrow it, right? Immediately. If we have more than one and one happens to be in the field a lot, like a salesperson or something like that, you can't have anything that is location based then, right? So nothing written, nothing whiteboard, because they would constantly have to be traveling back and forth or whatever to check it. So those are just some things to keep in mind as you start to look to the future of your business. So task management and communication, then when tasks are clear, the communication is better. And then when the communication is clear, things get done. So task management defines what needs to be done, assigns the right person, sets those due dates, tracks the progress to completion. Better teamwork, better results, right? Communication then creates that alignment. So you're sharing updates and changes. People can ask questions and get answers. An example of this is, I had a sales team in a landscaping company that I was in. The sales team would always be communicating with the clients, right? Either they got the client complaints, they sold an extra work, there was a request, right? Can you do this or can you do that? How does that then get communicated to the crews? And then on an operations level, how does then someone ensure that it was followed through and done, right? So that would be an operations manager type level. So we give the responsibility to the person. It's assigned to them. they need to do it today, or they need to do it in 2 days when they're routed to be there, right? So that sets the expectation with the person that's requesting it. And then someone's able to say, did it get done, or ensure it got done, right? And then maybe even look at it, right? To ensure it got done as well. So fewer missed tasks, less rework. Because the last thing in a world like that you wanted to do was send a crew to a job site where they specifically needed to trim a shrub in a certain way. No joke, this happens all the time. Because that's what the owner requested, and they didn't do it, and they left the job site, right? And so then we've got to get someone back there, or the operations, team, whoever that may be, is the one that's then going and doing it themselves to ensure that the task got completed, as opposed to leaving it sit there for a whole nother week before the crew went back there the next time. So this keeps everyone informed, and it also reinforces accountability. So common communication challenges. Team members receive different information. Oh my goodness. They will do this to themselves even. So when you've got multiple people within your business, they may ask a friend in the business how to do something, right? Their closest confidant. They may ask you as the owner how to do something. They may ask the office manager how to do something, and they may get 3 different answers to that, right? And that's either the process is not documented or someone is interjecting their own opinion. That's a greater conversation that you then need to have behind that, but the different information is had, right? Important updates get missed. So maybe something got completed, maybe something couldn't get completed because, XYZ, whatever happened, but nobody actually communicated that to anyone, right? So that's a huge communication challenge. Employees are repeatedly asked the same questions. Wow, that is beyond frustrating. Decisions aren't communicated clearly, especially when there is a clear role where someone is owning something. So this happens a lot in companies where people kind of jump over a role. And what I mean by this is salespeople will sometimes jump over an operations person and go straight to someone who's doing the actual work, right? Because it's a waste of their time to talk to someone else. But that wasn't actually communicated to the person who was responsible for it. And so they still think it's supposed to be done a certain way, but that person now has been given different direction, right? And so that can cause a lot of confusion. And people always assume that someone else knows. Maybe they saw, an email where there's 7 people copied on it. So it's like, oh, yeah, we assume everybody knows about it. And so nobody talks about it. And then that's, again, back to that whole nobody owns it, right? And so nobody picked it up and ran with it. So clear communication isn't just nice to have, it's essential. It aligns your team, it prevents missed work, and it drives those better results. So not every conversation belongs everywhere, though, when we start to create our communication lanes. So daily updates could be in something like a team chat, right? If it's just an update, we're giving information. Project work is almost always going to be in some kind of task management system. Procedures, these are called, procedures are SOPs, standard operating procedures, and process documents. So you probably have these on a server somewhere. You might have these actually posted right in front of where someone is going to be doing certain work. So like if they're using a certain piece of equipment or they're creating something, right, you probably have the process like literally hanging on the wall, step 1, step 2, step 3. I think about that when I think of fast food restaurants, like how does someone create the burger, right? You'll literally see the picture of the burger so that they know every single time that they create it exactly like that, every single time. Client information will be in a CRM, a customer resource management, or a client file. Individual client files is sometimes difficult because someone may have that client file, it might be in someone's head, right? So a CRM system is more software oriented, even if it's something like a spreadsheet, so that whomever needs to look up that client information can access it easily. And then company announcements, you're usually going to share those either with the daily updates, right? Some kind of team chat, you might have a group chat, something like that. Or you're going to have meetings, right? A lot of businesses have a stand-up meeting when work starts, right? And they'll share these important things for the day to everyone to ensure that they all got the same information at the same time. These regular check-ins, kind of like I was just talking, they call them stand-up meetings or morning meetings. Consistency beats constant communication, actually. So weekly team meetings, these talk about priorities, roadblocks, updates, upcoming deadlines, and then you have operations reviews. So if you notice the little symbol in the middle, it's constantly going again and again. So what's working, what's slowing us down, and what needs improvement. So most teams actually need fewer meetings, but more predictable communication. So once you've defined those communication channels and what gets communicated within those channels, employees then start to expect certain things to come to them in certain ways. And that will help prevent a lot of phone calls, text messages, wearing down the carpet to your desk, and those types of things. So which communication challenge creates the most frustration in your business right now? I'll give you a second to answer that. And obviously for the solopreneur on here, it's just you. So you probably don't have a communication challenge with yourself right now. But for those of you that obviously the project management custom issue, there sounds like there's some communication breakdowns. Small teams, right? You're able to control that for right now. This will become a scalability issue. As far as communication is concerned, right? And especially once people start to take off, more of those owning some results and those responsibilities as well. Oh, Erin, the solopreneur. I'm sorry, I have to share that. There's a lot of communication challenges with herself right now. So that was too good not to share. Yeah, and sometimes people don't speak up. That was another one, and they don't know how to do something, and then later you find out they didn't do it right, right? This is one of my most frustrating things throughout my career in working with people is that I always say, why didn't they just ask, right? Like if someone doesn't know how to do something or someone had a question, outside of the people that will ask 10,000 questions and ask you the exact same question 7 times a day, there are those personality types, right, that just will not ask you a question and they will not tell you when they have a problem. And so finding things like that is frustrating, but it is also a teachable, trainable moment, right? Especially if you can pinpoint exactly who it was that you're having that problem with. And then it looks like we've got a shared kitchen that's a training ground. So sounds like there might be multiple people in there that are distracting and maybe causing some process problems. But even with great communication, it won't create consistency though without the process. So we've got to go back to the process. 3 essentials. Tasks tell us what needs to be done. Communication tells us what people need to know. And the process then tells us how the work then gets done. And we're going to go into a process system then. So this is how work gets done consistently. Person A gets a different result, person B, different result, person C, this is without a process. Or even if you have a process, but nobody's really sure what it is, and they're definitely not following it, right? You're going to get these different processes. With a process, the goal with a great process, right, is that you're going to get the same result, same result, same result. And generally, when you are creating a process, if any of you guys have heard of the entrepreneur operating system, it's called EOS. If you haven't, really cool stuff. You could start with a book called Traction. And it's a way that you can organize your business. And it talks about results, who owns them, right? How to put people in the right seat, the right person for the company, right? That fits your core values and things like that. So it's a cool book to read if you've not actually dove into structuring a business. And then there are entire corporations that are actually running on the entrepreneurial operating system. Our consulting firm actually is one of them. But it says when you start to document your processes or when you're writing them down that truly a process, you should document 20% of the process that gets you 80% of the way there. So remember how I said we're not really creating robots or machines, and we're not writing out every single thing in there. But you should have 20% of the process that gets you 80% of the way there. And then you might start to fill in further and further until you've got 100% of the process. That's after you're testing and testing and testing, and you know what's working and what's not working. So, what is a process? It's a simple, repeatable series of steps. There's a trigger. So, this happened. We then have these repeatable steps taken in the right order, and then we have an outcome. So, what's that expected result if we follow that process? Process example, this is client onboarding. So remember I talked about, I'm very passionate about this one because I've seen this done so bad. Same thing with products, right? So we sell it and then we've got to get it to operations. So customer might sign a contract. What happens when the customer signs a contract? There's a welcome email that gets sent to them. Thank you. We're happy to have you, right? Then we've got to collect the required documents. So somebody is responsible within this process, right? Probably to have a contract. There might be something to do with sales tax. There might be a checklist of information, right, that happened during that sales process that needs to be defined, sent over to the person doing custom work. There's probably a whole lot of notes, right? Maybe there's some pictures and examples. I'm not sure exactly what you do, but there's probably a lot of detail that goes into it when you're doing custom work that you need to have all written down, all defined when you do this process. And then scheduling a kickoff meeting. Depending on the type of business, right? You may not be scheduling a kickoff meeting, but kickoff meetings usually are a collection of the minds, right? And in all these different groups to make sure everybody's on the same page. So this is very similar to what we do when we onboard a bookkeeping client in our company. So the customer signs the contract. They obviously are aware. They get that welcome email and it's telling them to schedule their kickoff meeting. And then we make sure that we've got all the documents internally. We've got everything set up in our system before that scheduling meeting happens. And during the onboarding meeting, they not only meet with the salesperson that talked to them through that entire process, but they also meet who's working with them on the bookkeeping side. And then they get all those, how are they communicating them with their bookkeeper, right? What's that share drive look like? How do they prefer to be spoken to, either email, text message, phone calls, right? Do they want to work through the portal? All that gets worked out in the onboarding meeting and it all gets defined, right? Because if their bookkeeper then takes a day off or a vacation or whatever, we've got all those notes, all that information. It's very clear. Someone can step in and do the work if needed. And the client then doesn't have any inconsistency in the results that they're receiving at that time. And so then we consider that to be the customer is onboarded and they start working with the bookkeeper. Just an example of our onboarding process. So could someone else successfully complete this task without me? That's the whole point, right? It's defined enough. I could look at this right now and say, okay, the only thing that I think I'm unsure if I was stepping into your business right now is I don't know what required documents I have to collect because it just says collect the required documents, right? So there's probably a checklist in there that tells me what those required documents would be that I would add to that process. Maybe how they schedule the meeting kickoff, like is there a link, who's supposed to be involved, right? So I'd want a little more definition there. But other than that, I think that one's pretty clear. So you probably need better documentation, clearer instructions, right? And so this is why you're refining those processes. You're looking at them together to say, okay, we need to add a little more detail here. That's welcome email up there in number 2. It might be an actual automated email, or it might be a standardized email that you send out as a company, right? That tells you what to expect in this onboarding meeting to the client, exactly what documents they should bring, that type of thing. And then a defined process. So create a replicatable or repeatable system that gets those consistent results. So why owners avoid documenting process? These are the most common objections. I don't have time. So that's always the first one. I've got to write this down. I've got to keep this somewhere. I've got to train people. I'm already spending time explaining it repeatedly. This is really to tame the dragon, as some people will say, to get you out of that perpetual chaos, the firefighting, all of that. It does take time to document processes, but once you've got them there, then it's training, 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 training. You just continue training. And then you can start dealing with personnel issues if training fails, right? So someone is just refusing to follow the process. They won't get on board. They're always telling someone how to do it different. That's a personnel problem. That's not a process problem, right? And you can look at it a little bit differently than you probably looked at it before. It changes too often. So reality, most core processes are much more stable than we think. Often they will change just because we decide to do them differently from one point to the other. So when we start to develop processes, though, we're looking for what is the most efficient way to do something and the smartest way, right? And so a process might be a bad process. It might be cumbersome. It might be inefficient, right? That's where we're testing them and then we're changing them and updating them until we get to where we've got a really awesome process that's extremely efficient. People can follow it. They understand it. That's when you know life has changed, when you start to see that. And then it's all in my head. Exactly. This is why we need to document them. So if you could document one process this month, what should it be? And I'm going to let you go ahead and answer that in the chat. And I'm going to keep moving because we've only got about 6 more minutes and I've got a few more slides. So process documentation doesn't have to be complicated though. As I mentioned it before, you're going to document 20% to get 80% of the benefit. So perfection of an SOP might look like a 40-page SOP. Those are hard to create. They're hard to maintain, right? Because if you change your product that you're selling or the way that you're doing something, then you got to rewrite the whole SOP. Progress, though, is very much like that process that I showed you right here on the left-hand side. It's a simple step-by-step checklist, really, is what you're looking for. So step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. What is the trigger? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What is done? What does done look like? They're easy to create. They're easy to update. So working on the business, guy on the left, right, sitting on the beach, working in the business, stack of papers, we're sweating, it's exhausting, nobody loves what we're doing. So this is called the operations trap. You might have heard it called the whirlwind. I used to be in a company, we talked about the whirlwind all the time because everybody was in the whirlwind. We're busy, we don't have time for improvements, our systems stay inefficient, more work on the owner, and we're busier than ever before, and we just keep spinning, it never stops. The busier we become, the more important it is to create that time. People are really, really good at being busy too, and really looking busy. You probably have a lot of employees that do that. They will make things up all day long and be extremely busy. I actually used to be in the pharmaceutical world, and if you know anything about pharmaceuticals, they're extremely efficient, they're extremely over-processed. There's a lot of things that happen in pharmaceutical companies, kind of an inspiration really in some of the things that they do. However, bad employees will be really good at being busy and getting absolutely nothing done. So that is why processes are good, because you can watch how that process is flowing. You know what done looks like. They have that expectation. You have that expectation. And it's much easier to deal with things like that. So improvement doesn't have to be complicated. You really are just looking first at what's slowing you down. So when I ask the question, what is one process that each of you could start to document and implement? None of you answered. So if you could go ahead and try to answer that one, that's important, because that's going to be your first step out of this class, is to focus on one process and how that process would make a marked improvement in your business if it existed. And we can go back to those steps, right? It's the question I get asked all the time. It's the one that's taking the most time. It's that repeated issues. Maybe it's where those things are falling through the cracks the most often, right? Biggest pain point is typically what you're going to pick for a process problem. And then just start with 30 minutes a week. You just have to carve it out. You have to dedicate it. What questions keep coming up? If you keep a running list of this, right, and you're really focused on what's happening there, you can create a running list in your notes on your phone, right? This is a question that came up today, and this and this, and you can start to string them together and see where those might be falling. Maybe it's a sales thing, maybe it's an operations thing. We had an answer about documenting admin tasks that only I do. Absolutely. When you are an owner and you don't have an admin and you've never had an office manager or something like this can be one of the hardest things, right? But it also can be one of the best things. What do I need to get off my plate? What can I pass to someone else, right? And to start documenting that so that someone can take over those job responsibilities. So stop what's wasting time, simplify what can be made easier, and what should become a documented process. I am going to give you guys these slides. I'm actually going to send them to Maria at Bridgeway, and then I'll have her send these out to you. because there are some chat GPT prompts in here that will help you work through creating processes and doing an internal review on your business. So the prompts helped you get started. This is your operations review one. This one is then to take you into action planning, which is going to help you define that. So key takeaways here. Overwhelm is often a systems problem, not a workload problem. It is not always the best idea to throw more people at it, right? That's sometimes just more people, more cost, and you really need to drill down on what the system is. If everything depends on you, the business becomes much harder to grow and manage. Strong operations create that consistency. Remember, the goal is not perfection, it's to get repeatable results. Every business needs 3 core systems: operations, people, financial, sales being the 4th one. Not sure why I dropped that one off there. Task communication and processes have to be clear. People really do perform better when the expectations and the workflows are defined, right? It eliminates a lot of questions. Document 20% of what gets you 80% of the benefit. Start with the major steps, and then you can add the detail in later as you continue to work on them. And then work on the business regularly. Set aside time each week to identify one bottleneck and make one improvement. So not working in the business, all those things we're doing right, work on the business. We also got a marketing, creating the customer journey and creating mailing lists. So yeah, there are processes with that. What does the customer journey look like in your business? And then how do you then communicate that information out there? So I thank you all for joining tonight. I will send these over to Maria so you guys can get this information. Just start small, right? Start writing stuff down. Start looking at what things are, and it's all about giving yourself more time, right? And ultimately growing your business. So have a good evening.